What a story. This is the Outside Gate with Steve Hall on the L4 Media Network, where we talk US moto and anywhere the conversation goes. When I was a kid, I used to read stories, Wolfman stories, and he would be often mentioning about Brother Mike, gun riding with Brother Mike and the bikes that Brother Mike had. And who'd have thought that I'd be talking to him myself? Mike Webb, how are you?
I'm good, Steve. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. I'm great, right? Yeah, no, thank you very much for your time. Um, Dude, we might just touch on a little bit about the AMA motocross. We had a pretty action-packed, my favourite round in recent memory of motocross or supercross last weekend with all the ups and downs and the action that happened. You know, there was good and bad, but yeah, what's your thoughts on Jet making a mistake? Chase is obviously the main talking point is Chase's amazing ride. And then also there was a lot of action in the 250s. What's your thoughts?
Well, I thought it was great for racing. That
Yeah,
that was the first thing. Is as much as I love watching Jet dominate because he's generational. We know that his talent is, that once in a couple of decades talent.
mm,
It's great that the racing's good. That's what we want to see. I kind of equate it to F1. I love Verstappen, but I want to see somebody stick a wheel on him. So that's as far as a racing fan, that's what I liked. It's funny. I was talking with Ricky Johnson. I work with Ricky Johnson on a side project. We have an adventure tour company, but we were talking today, and I asked him what he thought, and he was interesting. He goes, if Jet responds in Colorado in the first moto and Chase can't get him, it'll just reset everything. It'll go
yeah,
back to like it was at Paula. Chase will that newfound confidence will be shattered, and Chase will be
mm,
following, and Jet will go on being Jet. If Chase can be the Chase of the second moto at Hangtown, then it's game on for the rest of the
mm,
series. So that was Ricky's take, and you know he's been through it all. So
yeah.
so I really what he said made a lot of sense to me.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's I agree, and that's a pretty common sort of thing I've heard through through some other podcasts and some other friends and that sort of thing. That yeah, it's a lot hinges on this weekend, and then also the variable is how Jet's leg is, because as you know, we never hear the full story on how riders are feeling. It's always there's
Yeah,
when they say they're okay, they're often not okay. So it's
yeah.
really
That
interesting.
that's a it's a strange thing about our sport, that secrecy we have with
Mm,
injuries, and I know the times that all my riders would be hurt, and we'd of course pretend they weren't, and it wasn't that bad, and you play it down because you know I guess it shows a potential weakness for the rider, and the other
mm,
riders will attack. Um, but I don't know, it's kind of dumb. Again, I go back to F1. F1 is so transparent. If a guy sneezed, there's information about it. So for us, if Jet's crash was violent, I mean that thing was
yeah.
gnarly, and it looked like he came down on that foot peg, and those things are razor sharp tie
Mm.
pegs, and supposedly there's a chunk missing out of his hip. Um, so it remains to be seen, how he responds. But that kid, that was a gnarly hit. So
Mm.
we'll see what happens.
It's These kids are so tough. Like, yeah, even talking like 250s, like Deegan's crash, man. Like that was violent. And Deegan bounced up that quick that I don't even think he took a breath on the ground. He was up that quick.
Yeah, that was
Um,
amazing because it
yeah,
looked like he kind of caught his neck on the lower fork which
yeah,
sent him into the helicopter. But
yeah,
he landed perfect. He landed like a cat and just
yeah.
jumped right
Just
back
bounced,
up.
jumped
So
back up and just
it was
gone. Like
amazing.
he's a tough kid. That one, like he Deegan, man. Like sometimes the things he says and that I cringe and that, but I'm a fan. Like it's that kid's awesome.
Yeah,
He's great for the sport, and that kid is tough. Like yeah, super tough. The 250s, it's probably a big. Probably a bit like fair bit hinges, I think, on Thunder Valley for Tom and Levi, I think, to make a bit of a stand
I
against
agree.
Deegan. Mm,
Yeah, I think Levi surprised me all season with his speed, and it's legit. I mean, we're seeing
mm,
it every week. How he responds is important, and then I expect I expect a lot out of Vial. That guy's a two-time world
yeah,
champion, and he's ridden. It's the thing about the GPs. American tracks tend to be pretty much the same
yeah,
as far as the consistency of the dirt, how they're prepped. Hopefully that changes. They stop watering them so much and stops being rutocross. That gets kind of old. Hangtown was great. They brought in a new
mm,
track guy, Sean Schaefer, and he did a great job on the track. So I want to see what Vial does in Colorado too. I think he's got mega game. He's
yeah,
that bike's good. He's an experienced, two-time world GP champion. He rode here last year. He understands how the system works now. And I think the battle with Deegan's going to go with him and Vial. I think we'll have to see what Levi does, but I see Vial being the guy to battle Deegan every week.
yeah. Well, I tipped Vial for champion before the season, so yeah,
There you go.
and
Yeah.
that's that a lot of that is based on his past in Europe. Like they're a long, grueling championship over there, and they're no joke. Like they're no joke. The guys he was competing against over there, it's like they're doing like 40 races, so like that's a long
Well,
grueling
I look
championship.
at that young crop coming up in Europe in the lights class. They're
Yeah,
unbelievable.
aren't
The
they?
Cohen brothers um, and
DeWolf,
DeWolf, those guys, they
yeah,
are absolutely stunning to watch.
they are.
I actually, I mean, Hangtown was great, but I like watching the GPs more than the American motocross just because the tracks change so radically. One week you're in Argentina and the next week you're in France or Germany. That's what I love about it. And those guys have to be able to ride sand, hard pack, loam, ruts, mud. They have to be able to ride anything. So that young crop, though,
Yeah,
man, it's going to be amazing. I don't know if they're going to stay in Europe or come to America, but it's really good for the sport that much talent is coming up from Europe.
it is. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, like well, the talk is that Cowan brothers and DeWolf are all they those three at least are keen to come to the States. So
Okay,
yeah, that's the talk that's been going around for a good while, and I believe that there's just a lot more money to be made in the States.
I
Um,
think so.
I think the MXGP they're not the money's not there. So
Yeah,
not,
I think if you grab the number one plate in either class, you can make equivalent money, but only if you grab that number one plate. I think
okay.
that second through maybe seventh, there's no parity with America. There's good money all the way down the line in America. So I
Mm,
can see that.
mm. Awesome. Thanks for your thoughts on that, Mike. That's good. I thought that such a pivotal, exciting round that we'd talk a little bit about that. Um, Now let's get into your story.
Okay.
My favorite part of the show, Mike, is what I always love hearing about is people's first experiences and when the bug bit them to be a motorcycle person. So yeah, do you remember that that first time that you saw a mini bike, you saw your mate's mini bike, all these stories. How did that go down?
Yeah, well, I was lucky. My brothers and I we were part of that explosion of the 1960s in America, and it all coincided with a lot of things. It was like a perfect storm to make the sport take off or the industry take off. One was On Any Sunday, without a doubt. That movie was it was our Bible. I remember watching it. I remember sitting in the theater, and I think my brothers and I stayed and watched it like 3 times because we were so enthralled with it. The whole thing, the cinematography, the music, Bruce Brown's narrative, it just as a kid, it was so magical and such an influence that I remember my brothers and I looking at each other going, that's what we're going to do. And we were stick and ball kids. We played football and baseball, and my dad had us in all those sports. Literally that movie changed everything. So that was one thing. The other was, back then, I grew up in Southern California, and where I grew up, it was tons of open fields. The area, it's the San Fernando Valley, but now it's wall-to-wall houses all the way across the valley. But when I was a kid, it was orange groves and fields and old dairies, and then housing was sporadically placed between it. So we literally had a field next door across the street. It was probably, I want to say it was maybe 3 acres at the most. But to us, it might as well have been Hangtown to us. And it was a little single track loop going around it that some kids had made. And all the kids in the neighborhood, everybody somehow got a mini bike or some piece of crap hand-me-down motorcycle, usually street bikes with the fenders cut. And you would take the lights off. Oh, I'm sorry. And take the lights off, kind of make them, cut the fenders, make them somewhat like look like a dirt bike. And we would go riding every day, every single day. And that was the thing. And then there wasn't just me and my brothers. It was like 5 other kids on the block. And then the neighborhood over, there's 3 kids on that. So every day that field was full of kids riding, and we rode and rode and rode. And we were just little geeks. We didn't know what we were doing, but the sheer love of riding a dirt bike, that freedom that everybody experiences once they get on them, that was really in us. So you had the movie, you had the open land of the time, and the sport just exploded. It just took off. And also at that same time, you had the beginnings of motocross was just starting to take off. So the Europeans had come over. They had done their with Edison Dye, he brought over DeCoster and Hallman and Aki Janssen, guys like that. And they went around doing races. And my brother Tom we played Pop Warner football, which is like below high school football here. It's organized, it's tackle, pads, the whole thing. We were playing that, and we were pretty serious about it. And my brother's coach told the kids on the team, he said, hey, this weekend, I'm going to go watch this motorcycle race. If any of you kids want to go, you can go with me, and we'll go watch this race. So Tom went. He was like maybe 12 years old or something. Tom went to the race, and it turned out it was the Westlake GP, which, if you look back in history now, was a pivotal moment in American motocross. So it was part of the tour with DeCoster and Hallman and Aki and those guys, Brian Wade from England. And it was a old movie set out in Westlake, California, which was about a half hour from our house. And it was in kind of the hills by Malibu, by before the ocean. And they went through the old movie set, and they laid out a track in the hills. And Tom went, and he got to see DeCoster, and he got to see Hallman, and he got to see the Euros, Joel Robert riding wheelies all the way down the straightaway. We'd never seen anything like this. This was actually before On Any Sunday. And Tom came home, and he goes, Mike, he goes, you'll never understand what I just saw. He goes, I can't even describe it to you, how radical it is, how fast they are and flamboyant, and they jump and they cross up and they do wheelies. And me and my little brother are just like salivating, listening to Tom talk. And that was a big part. Then On Any Sunday hit. Then pretty soon we would, Dirt Bike Magazine, the original Dirt Bike Magazine came out, and we could actually, once a month, you could actually see your heroes in there. And all that kind of came together at a perfect moment. And it just, that was the genesis. That's what started everything.
I love it. I can't get enough of the stories of that era. You know, like I'm a, because of where I grew up, so far away from everything, but loving it so much. I'm sort of a throwback. My taste and my love of things in the sport is sort of 10 years before my time, I guess, because where I grew up, there was no motocross scene. There was just got kids would ride out the bush. You didn't know what you were doing. You didn't know much about bikes. You know, nobody raced around here, and then eventually one of my mates, a guy, you know, whose dad had the local Honda dealership, which mostly sold farm bikes. He started getting CRs and XRs, and it was like, wow, look at this stuff.
Yeah.
And you started to learn a bit through him. And yeah, magazines was sort of all we had, and we'd get them super late. And the only video or footage of any dirt bike racing that I got to see was on any Sunday, and I would go and repeatedly hire. I'd repeatedly hire on any Sunday, and winners take all on VHS from the local, you know, whatever
Yep.
it was, Blockbuster or whatever it was called. I
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
repeatedly hire them. I get my dad's rental card, and you go down and you'd get I get on any Sunday for a week, and then winners take all. And then eventually I found there was an on any Sunday too. It's not as good, but it was still cool, you know. And you'd see,
Right.
you know, and that was all I had. And then one shopping trip there, I found a Ricky Johnson Profile of a Champion, and then it was
Okay.
I owned that, and it was just on repeat, you know, because that was like,
Yeah.
wow, you know. So that was my thing. But yeah, I consider myself a product, even though that was in the 80s. You know, I'm a product of On Any Sunday. You know, that just absolutely did it for me. And you know, I was there was a few kids at school who had dirt bikes, but most of them were like a farm kid who was lucky enough to get a motocross bike, but they didn't really know anything about the sport and that sort of
Right.
thing. And you know, like I remember saying to people, you know, kids would be talking about what happened in the cricket. Cricket's big in Australia. I was like, I didn't know what happened in the cricket. I was just wondering. I'd be just wondering, you know, if RJ was back from his wrist injury yet, you know, like that was sort of
right.
yeah. So
Nobody knew what you were talking about. Probably.
that's right, you know. And then in Australia, you know, we had Craig Dack and Glenn Bell and these guys that I'd be like, you
Sure.
know, I'd have the Australian magazines and the American magazines, but the American dirt bike magazine was always my favorite, and always had that love for that whole Californian scene, and Malcolm Smith's, you know, like my hero, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's I'm sort of my stories of getting the love of it is somewhat similar, but yeah, later, and because I'm so far the big time delay to a kid in the bush in Australia, you know. So
yeah.
it's I have a lot of fondness for that, and I was lucky enough to visit California for the first time. I got so glad I got talked into actually spending some money and going back in January there, and which was, apart from my kids being born, that was the greatest moments of my life. And we went there and went to Anaheim, and I went out. One day I just went out driving in the high desert, just looking around, you know.
Yeah.
And I saw dudes on dirt bikes out there, and I was just like, wow, this is so cool, you know. I went to Elsinore, the town of Elsinore. I had to go to Elsinore, and
Right.
I had a grin from ear to ear when I saw the town sign Elsinore. You know, I was like, wow, this is where the Elsinore Grand Prix was. It was just amazing.
Yeah.
I got mates who would just laugh. It's like, Elsinore is a pretty ordinary town, like, but I'm like, nah, you don't understand, because they're younger, you know, they don't know any Sunday.
Right.
This is where the Elsinore Grand Prix was. You know, I got Mexican
But that's
food in
why,
Elsinore. This is awesome.
because you of the way you were introduced to the sport, and it was kind of untouchable and far away, it made that magic inside you. So when you do get to see just the boring town of Elsinore, to you it's this magic, thing. I know exactly what you're talking about. When the GP circuit, they came to Carlsbad, In the first 2 years, it wasn't a GP. The promoters, the FIM made the promoters hold the event, and they wanted to see how they handled the event, the crowds and everything else. So I went with a buddy from high school, and he goes, yeah, I'm going to this race down in Carlsbad. And I'm going, yeah, I'm in. And we went down there. I took my little brother with me, and we went down there, and it was the year before it became a GP, but all the Euros were there. Willie Bauer was there. He won it on a Mako, and they had just, this was great. They had just moved up the shocks on the Mako. So it was the absolute beginning of the long travel evolution. So the Mako had moved up the shocks, and Bauer just kicked ass. And DeCoster was fast, but he was still on a standard Suzuki with the shocks moved back, and it didn't have the long travel. But we saw that, and we went to Carlsbad, and I saw Willie Bauer, and I saw Roger, and just on the hard packed adobe of Carlsbad, in the uphill, which was so huge, and the downhill, which was so fast. And I just remember coming back on, it just changed again. It was another thing that reaffirmed why I was so in love with this sport. It was so incredible to me to watch. Now, some kids, maybe it's the first time they go to an NBA game, and they see the Lakers play, and they see how big they are and how great. Maybe it's that. For me, stick and ball never did that. Motocross did it. It just clicked something inside of me. And literally, my brothers and I, we went to every single Carlsbad there was. And I can't remember how many there were, but we went to every, that was our thing to do. In June, you got out of school, you made a road trip down to Carlsbad, you slept on the beach. Back then you could sleep on the beach. Now you can't do any of those things now, but yeah. And just, we had no money. I mean, we were eating like, hot dogs and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, because everybody's pulling together everything they have. One year, excuse me, we didn't have enough money for tickets, because we were just punk kids, and we snuck in. It's literally Tom had a broken foot. He had broken his foot, and so he had to drive in. But I go, Tom, let me out a couple of miles from the entrance, and I'm going to sneak through the hills. And there was all vineyards back then. And I'm going to sneak under the fence and sneak in, because I don't have enough money to get in. So it was me and a buddy, and Tom let us off. And we thought it was just like maybe one hill that we had to kind of sneak through, and then we could get to the backside of the course. Well, it turns out we were about 5 miles off. So we hiked for like 5 miles. It took us hours to get there. And we got in, snuck under the fence, finally got in, and I think we might have missed the first moto. We were so late because I was trying to sneak in. But those Carlsbads, yeah, I saw all the greats. I got to see Roger never won it, and of course I got to work with Roger years later, and I would ask him all the time about it, and he would tell me how frustrated he was because Garrett Wolsink, I think, won it 4 times, maybe 5, I forget, but Roger would beat Garrett in the GPs every year, but Garrett, when it came to California, he just somehow figured out that hard pack.
Yeah. He
would go kick back at the beach where Roger was doing tons of press and testing and being Roger. If you get to know Roger, he's just a workaholic. And Garrett was just this laid back Dutch dentist that was just, checking out Southern California, hanging out by the pool, and he'd be real relaxed, and he would win the thing every single year. And it drove RD nuts. But yeah, I got to see that. I got to see I got to see Marty Moats win it. He was the first American to ever win it when he won it. And then and I got to see Ricky RJ dominate it when he was just the apex predator of motocross on that Works Honda. So that was a great part of my youth. I got to see all that happen. So that was cool.
Awesome. What was your first bike?
So my first bike, he was my brother's godfather. So he was Tom's godfather, and his wife worked with my mom. My mom was a nurse, a registered nurse, and they worked together. This guy worked for Pepsi Cola, and he was in marketing or advertising with Pepsi Cola, and Pepsi was giving away a Suzuki 50, which was it was a full-blown motorcycle, but it was kind of based on a road racer. So it had a kind of a road race kind of a seat with like a rounded back and a long, thin tank. was a case frame, 50cc, and Suzuki was giving it away in some contest. And Tom's godfather, he was the head of marketing for Pepsi. He made sure that we won the contest. So he rigged it that we got the bike. So we got that Suzuki 50, and that's how we learned how to ride a bike. I remember my dad teaching me how to shift because I didn't know how to shift a bike. So, and friends had mini bikes, which were one speed. They had no transmission, and I could ride those, and I was good on my bicycle, but I didn't know how to use a clutch. And to this day, I remember my dad yelling at me. He's sitting on the back, and he would get me so nervous. I'd be so flustered, like, give it a little gas, let the clutch out soft. And I'd be popping the clutch and stalling it and him getting mad. But he taught me to ride, taught me to shift on that. And then Tom and I shared that bike, which didn't go over very well because as brothers, Tom was bigger than me. So the deal was we would go to the field next door and Tom would say, okay, I'm going to do 2 laps. And then I'll bring it in. Then you can do 2 laps. I go, okay. So Tom would take off. Well, he would just stay out there, and I'd be on the side. I'd waving him down like, "Hey, man, you're doing like 3 laps." Tom would stay out there for 10 laps, and he was bigger. There's nothing I could do. So finally, he'd come in, and then I'd get on it, and I would do my thing. So that's how we started, a Suzuki 50. And I always laughed because I ended up working for Suzuki, and my very first bike was a Suzuki. I worked for them almost 25 years. I worked for the company. I got to meet everybody in the company. I got to know DeCoster all through Suzuki, and it was just a weird connection there. But that's how we started, Suzuki 50.
Fantastic. Yeah, I can usually picture old bikes. Like I'm a big fan of vintage bikes, and I'm also a sucker for vintage mini bikes. But I can't picture that one. I'm going to have to look that one up. And
it's a 1968 Suzuki 50. You'll check it out. I think at the time Suzuki might have won. In MotoGP, they used to have a 50cc class, and it was really, really competitive. And I believe Suzuki won it 2 or 3 times, and that was supposed to be kind of a production semi version of their MotoGP bike. But of course, we chopped the fenders off and put on knobbies and put on handlebars with a crossbar and tried to make it into a dirt bike. First thing we did. So we tried to morph it into a dirt bike.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Now I've got this. I've got a funny passion for little old, funny little mini bikes and old trail bikes and that sort of thing. I think it's from reading about them and that sort of thing. Like I started getting into magazines in the 80s, but straight away I started buying back issues because I thought twin shocks and aluminium tanks and all this stuff was just cool, like
right. Yeah,
my knowledge sort of predates me. Yeah. Mike, tell us a bit about your early racing days. So how did you get into racing? Do you remember your first race and that sort of thing?
Well, we rode, like I said, we rode in the field every day, and we were kind of the, I want to say, geeks. We didn't know what we were doing. We just loved riding.
Yeah.
And every, like, once in a while, like once a week or something, this kid would come out, and he was and we were on just cobbled together pieces of crap, Honda SL 90s, and step through Honda 50s that someone, would take the fenders off, and our Suzuki 50. And this kid would come out on the field about once a week and on a Hodaka. And this kid raced, and I'll never forget. It was the most stunning motorcycle I'd ever seen. It was just a Hodaka 100,
but it
was a Super Rat.
Yeah,
but he had, instead of the chrome tank, he had painted it. I want to say, I think it was orange or baby blue. I forget what, and had matching fenders. His dad was a auto body guy and was a painter, so he would paint the kids' bikes, and the kid was great. I mean, this kid was like, he was probably a 125 expert or a 100 expert at the time. And we can't even dream of racing. This kid would come out, and all the little groms, me and all my geek buddies, we would stay off the side of the track, and everybody would park their bike, and we'd watch this kid do laps. And he would just be locked sideways doing power slides around the corners, and our eyeballs are popping out of our heads, and he's riding wheelies all the way down the straightaway. And we're like, oh my God, that's how good you can get. That's possible. So this kid, we kept watching and we kept learning from him. And, we kind of started getting a little bit better and a little bit faster. And then a buddy, the same guy that took me to Carlsbad, he started racing before me, and he had a Yamaha AT1 125, which was their enduro. And he took the lights off and he put on a expansion chamber, a get kit pipe on it. And he went and raced at a place called Bay Mare. And he came back and he told me, he goes, dude, I raced. It was gnarly. I go, geez, you actually raced? He goes, yeah. He goes, it was so intense. He goes, I go, what'd you get? He goes, I got like an 18th and a 17th or something. I'm like, oh my God. He goes, I'm going to race next week. Do you want to go? And I'm like, okay. So I go with him to the race, and he goes, do you want to race one of the motos? I'm like, get out of here. He goes, yeah, might as well. We're here. I go, okay. Steve, I was so nervous. I was so scared to death that I believe I got lapped twice in the one moto. I don't think I made a lap without crashing. The hills, which now I would be jumping them by 100 feet, to me, they look like Mount Everest. I was scared to death the whole time. And people are running into me, knocking me down, and I'm in the way, and they're screaming at me. And I finished the moto, and I remember saying, I will never do that again. I go, I just don't have it. This is way, way too gnarly. And I came home and I told my brothers, and they were all waiting to hear how I did. I go, no, dude, it's way over our league, way, way beyond us. But I stuck with riding. So I kept riding and I kept riding. And I cobbled up some money, and I borrowed some money from my folks, and I was able to buy a used CZ 250. And we started practicing. We could go to Indian Dunes, which is a real famous track in Southern California. That's where Johnny O'Mara came out of, and Jimmy Hawley. And we could go there during the week and practice. And Tom and I would go there, and I would practice and practice, and I got better and better and better. And finally, Tom decided, it's a year later now, and Tom decides to race. He's got a Yamaha 250 MX, and he raced, and I couldn't go that weekend. And he came back. He goes, yeah, I got like a 2/5 or something. I'm like, you're kidding. You did that? He goes, yeah, man, I had 2/5, top 10. I'm like, Jesus, that's unbelievable. So the next week I was going to race, and I was so nervous the whole time. And it had been 1 year since the race. I got lapped twice. And it was the 250 beginner class at Indian Dunes, and I won both motos going away. I mean, I blew everybody into the weeds, blew past Tom. I think finished third or fourth. And I came in, I'm going, well, that was the easiest thing I've ever done in my life. I was so confident, and I won, I think the next 3 races after that, I won every single moto, and they bumped me up to junior, which was the next level. And then I won at that level. I mean, I won everything. It was pretty amazing. And then they bumped me up to intermediate, and I got a better bike. I got one of the first YZ 250s. And that thing, it was basically a works bike. I think they made 1,000 of them, and they were direct replicas of what the Håkan Andersen and Van Velthoven and the Euros were riding in Europe. And I got that thing because my girlfriend owned a Yamaha shop, so I kind of was able to get a deal through her. And I kicked ass on that thing. Yeah. And so like my career was looking like, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this. So I made it. I was on the YZ, and I was racing in Indian Dunes, and I'm pretty cocky at this point. I'm pretty sure of myself. And there was at the start of a race, it was a fast downhill into a left-hander, and I got the whole shot, and I'm kind of going through the downhill left-hander, and they had watered, and I threw it away. Both wheels went out, and I was sliding, and I just remember the whole pack's behind me, and I'm like, Jesus, I gotta get off the track. As I'm sliding, I'm thinking this. So I'm kind of doing like, the dog crawl as fast as I could. And somebody just T-boned me in the side. They got me right in the side, and it broke all my ribs, and it shoved some ribs through my kidney. So I remember that was it. I was a mess after. I was hurt bad. So, and my mom was a nurse, so they took me to all these specialists, and the 2 or 3 doctors kept saying, yeah, we're going to have to take his kidney out. And I'm like, my mom's freaking out. My dad's freaking out. I'm freaking out because basically kidneys, one of the biggest organs in your body. And back then it was like Frankenstein surgery. They basically kind of opened you in half and pulled this thing out. And you only got one kidney left the rest of your life. You screw that up and you're done.
Yeah.
So my mom she kept, no, we're going to keep going. She finally went to a guy at, I think in UCLA or one of the SC, one of the big medical places. And they go, look, if the kid just stays off a motorcycle, I mean, basically stays in bed for a couple of months, the kidney might heal itself. And my mom was, okay, we'll try that instead of surgery. So I did. I basically just laid in bed for a couple of months. And I remember when I got hurt, I was probably 19. I looked like Jet Lawrence. I was so fit, at 19, you're just a rock star. And after 3 months in bed, I was just a skeleton. I was a complete stick. And eventually the kidney healed and the doctor said, yeah, you're done. You can never ride a motorcycle again. You can never, if you jostle your body hard again, you can actually start bleeding. Your kidney will start bleeding again. So it kind of scared the crap out of me for a few years. And motocross is such an intense sport, as you know. It's so all encompassing. It takes everything you got, especially if you're doing it at a pro level. When that's taken away, I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what to do. I was so lost. And I remember I took up rock climbing. I had to find something to fill that adrenaline rush. And I took up free climbing. I really got into that. But it wasn't quite the same, but I got into that as much as I could. And meanwhile, brother Tom, he kept racing motocross for a couple of years, but then someone convinced him. He was racing for a shop called Colby Honda, and Colby Hondas were a lot of top guys. Jim Hale, that later started Axo and Mechanics Wear. Jim Hale came out of there. Dave Arnold from Honda, who's now with Triumph, that genius. He came out of there. A lot of Jim O'Neill from O'Neill Clothing. Jim O'Neill came out of there. So it was a really reputable shop. And Tom was racing for them on Can-Ams in motocross. And they had an off-road team too. And one of the guys in the off-road team said, hey, Tom, why don't you come out and try this enduro, a desert enduro? Tom's like, what? Come on, I'm a motocrosser. I'm not one of those off-road geeks. Guy goes, just come out and try it. So brought out Tom to the desert, and he's riding it like it's an enduro. It's a timed event. And he's riding the thing like it's a motocross. So he's just pinning it, and he's 10 times faster than anybody because he was a pro motocrosser. But he's burning every check, and he finished probably 15th or 20th because you had to arrive at the checks on time back then, the American Enduro system. Yeah. But Tom got hooked. He loved it. And he goes, this off-road stuff, it's pretty bitching. It's, you ride all day long. You're not waiting for 2 motos in 8 hours. You ride all day. And he really liked that aspect. And so then the guy goes, come on, do another one. So Tom did another one, and the guy kind of started teaching how to keep time. And you took Tom's motocross speed and his youth and his courage, and you combined it with learning how to keep time. Well, he instantly was a player in off-road in California. So California, we have districts. Northern California is District 36. Down here, it's District 37. And district racing was huge back then. It was like, that's where all the big names came out of. So Tom became District 37 #1. He literally, every race he entered, he would win. Nobody could touch him because he had so much speed. And Tom's a smart guy. He figured out the timekeeping and all the tricks and nuances. He figured all that out. So fast forward, he's going to do his club that he raced for. Everybody was in a club, a desert club back then. And his club, every club had to not promote, but they had to work an event instead of race an event. So they had to be at the checks and be at the start and finish. And the riders you weren't allowed to race one event a year. So Tom, this one race came up and he goes, hey, come out with me. And I hadn't ridden a motorcycle in 8 years. I had not touched him. He goes, come out with me just to this, camp out. It's fun. I said, okay. And I went out, and he had both his bikes there, both his race bikes. And he goes, he in between the event or after the event, he goes, "Hey," he goes, "let's just take a putt down the road." I go, and I was like freaking. I go, "No, Tom, if I sit on the bike, my kidney will start bleeding." The friggin' doctors had scared me, and my mom had scared me so bad that it was just this, I'm just going to explode if I sit on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
So Tom goes, "Oh, bullshit." He goes, "Come on, let's just ride down. We'll just ride down the road and cruise." And Steve, I got on that bike, and it's like I had never gotten off one. It's the magic instantly came, everything came back. And I wrote it down and I wrote it around, and Tom goes, "Let's go for a little ride." And I'm going, "Okay." And I go, "Just take it easy. Don't hit any bumps." I can't hit any bumps. So we rode around for about an hour or two. And I remember thinking the whole time, I go, "Did I tear my kidney? Did I do it again?" I wouldn't even know if I did it. I'd be bleeding inside. I wouldn't know. You wouldn't know until you went to the bathroom. And then if you were peeing blood, you knew you were in trouble. And I remember I was all the way home. I was afraid to go to the bathroom because I didn't want to know if it was going to be bleeding. I was going to freak out. And everything was clear. I'm like, huh. And so the next week, Tom goes, "Yeah, come out again." And I came out again and I wrote a little bit more. And then I said, "My kidney's fine. I'm okay." And that started. By then, I had missed that critical window of turning pro in motocross. I was just there at the beginning. I had everything going, and I missed that whole window. So when I came back, Tom was into off-road. I got into off-road, and I just started going to the races with Tom, following Tom. And that's what led me to the off-road part of my life.
Yeah. So you started racing a little bit of off-road yourself though, yeah?
Yeah. So with Tom, he would, I would race on his minute because it'd be like 4 guys to a row is how the enduros went. Kind of like 6 days, like 4 guys take off in a row.
Yeah.
But, and Tom would have computers and route sheets. He looked like Dakar Rally, with all this equipment on his handlebars. I didn't have anything, right? I was just like my motocrosser or whatever it was. I had lights maybe. And then I was getting fast again. My speed came back pretty quick. So I was almost as fast as Tom. And I would ride with him on his row, and Tom would be doing all the timekeeping, and he'd haul ass in a section, and then there would be an uphill, and he'd slow down because there was a possible check on the other side, and he would be looking, and I would just be like behind him, just looking around, screwing off, riding wheelies, and he'd come over the top, and I would get second overall in these district races, which were big events. And Tom would get pissed, and he's like, "Dude," he goes, "I'm doing all the work." He goes, "You're just screwing around riding wheelies behind me." But I was having a blast, and I was getting faster and faster. And eventually he made me like go on my own minute, where I had to learn to ride on my own. But yeah, that was the start. And it's interesting because Tom got so good that the National Enduro Series would come around, and I think there would be 2 events, maybe 3 in California on the West Coast. Then there would be a couple in the Midwest, and then most of it was primarily back east. And this was when Dick Burleson was the enduro champion, and Terry Cunningham and guys like that.
Yeah.
Were the fast guys. And they came out west, and our enduros were desert enduros, but it was still an enduro, but it was a California desert. And Tom rode I believe he had an IT 400. No, he had a YZ 400, but he put an IT tank on it to get fuel capacity.
Yeah.
And knowing Tom, I think it had Mako forks on it. Tom was always, he couldn't leave his bikes alone. But he won the overall of the National Enduro when it came to California. And it was like, okay, now you're not just a good district guy. You just beat Dick Burleson and Terry Cunningham. You just won the overall. So Tom, to this day, is in the record books as winning a national. But when that happened, Paul Clipper or Super Hunky, I forget which one, from Dirt Bike, called Tom up because Tom was the hottest guy there was in Southern California and off-road. And he was working at Colby Honda at the time, and they called Tom up and they said, "Hey, would you be interested in coming to work for the magazine?" And this was this Bible we had been reading since we were kids. And Tom goes, "Absolutely." And he went to work for Dirt Bike, and that started Tom's career as a journalist. And that really changed our lives as well, because that magazine opened so many doors for me. It allowed me to get my job eventually with Suzuki was because of that magazine. But Tom, I think, what he's done as a journalist has been pretty amazing. His body of work is pretty fantastic. And that's how all that came about.
Yeah. It's the Moto Bible. Well, it was for me anyway. Yeah, it was that was my connection. Nowadays, which my some of my old English teachers from high school would be not believe that nowadays I'm a writer. I do some writing, and
Right.
and my inspiration and I think my style is comes from Super Hunky and from Tom. So that's
Right. The humor.
my two. That's my that I was reading their articles when I was supposed to be reading some other book that the English teacher would have given us.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's the way. I guess we might move into a little bit of Suzuki days. I will say I know I loved the show you did a month ago, might be a bit longer. You did a show with Weege where you got into your Suzuki days, and that was fantastic. So I'd encourage anyone to, if you haven't listened to that, definitely look up. You all know Weege, go and check that out. He dives pretty deep into Suzuki days. So we won't go too deep and have you talking about the same things again. But I just thought we'd touch on a bit of the Suzuki stuff. Who was your favorite rider in your time at Suzuki?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a lot of riders. It depends. I think I would separate off-road from my motocross days.
Yeah.
I would divide that. Off-road, I had so many great people. Steve Hatch, way up there. As far as one of the most positive people I've ever known in my life. That guy could be on fire and he would smile and say, don't worry about it. Here's a classic story with Steve. The year I started in 92, and that year Steve won the National Enduro Championship. And he and it was the last race of the year, and it was in Delaware, back east. And I flew out there, and the night before we went to dinner, and Steve goes right out with me to the track in the morning. And I go, okay. So we're riding in the car, and he and we're just BSing, talking about everything. Just he's so fun to be with and so open and free, with all his conversation. Everything about Steve is just so positive. And we're just talking away, and we get lost on the way to the start of the enduro. And because we're not paying attention, we're just so enthralled with our conversation. And pretty soon it's like, shit, it was 8:00 start time or whatever it was. And now it's panic mode just to find the start of the stupid event. And he's got to get dressed. He's got to get his bike and all this. And it ends up, we barely make it in time. And everybody's like, where were you? We're like, we'll tell you later. We're too embarrassed to tell them that we got lost because we weren't paying attention. But Steve ended up winning. He showed up late, barely got to the start, and then won the race. So, but that was Steve. He had this, he had such a willingness too. All my racers were great racers, and a lot of them were dedicated. But Steve firmly believed in his mind that every race he entered, he was going to win, or he had a shot at winning. And I love that about him. I love that. So Stevie was great. Rodney Smith, of course, we're still real tight. He and I, we talk weekly and do stuff together with Beta. Rodney's completely different, much more serious as a racer, not as he's a total prankster when he's not racing. But really, I learned a lot about how he approached racing. He was real analytical. Rodney would break it down, and he was really good at race management, incredibly good at race management. How especially the 3-hour GNCCs, how the race developed. Don't go out too hot, how to pace yourself in the beginning. He knew when to pick it up. He knew when to throw down a burner and break the guy behind you. Rodney was really smart at that. Mike Kudrowski, blast. Because I got Mike after motocross, and he was burnt out. Motocross burns you out. Off-road doesn't. Off-road, that's why I still ride off-road to this day. But moto, the intensity of just the sport itself, and then when you're at the high pro national level, that intensity can just burn you out. So when I got Mike in off-road, he was just, everything was new and fresh and fun. And the guy is funnier than hell. He is a riot. So that was really enjoyable. It was those days with Steve and Mike and Rodney were some of the funnest. Glenn Kearney, absolute blast. He was I think he was the first Aussie I hired, pretty sure. And one of the funniest people I've ever known in my life. Funny, fast. He was great. He got hurt, and I think he had a real shot of really making something, but he got hurt pretty bad. But just a character, so much fun. So he was great. But they're all great. They're all favorite. They're all different. Josh Strang, Josh, I think he was, I want to say he was 16 or 17 when he came over, and Shane Nally, who was my coordinator, my off-road coordinator, Glenn told us about Josh. He goes, hey, this Strang kid's good. He's like the up and coming kid out of Australia. And we knew there was a lot of talent coming out of Australia because Glenn had come out and Watsy had come out. And so Australia was kind of like, that's the secret fast guy ground is coming out of Australia. That's where you wanted to go look for talent. So we had Josh come out, and we had him do a race, but not in the pro class. He raced the A class, and he was doing like Aussie 4-day stuff. He wasn't used to the 2-hour sprints or 2.5-hour sprints.
Yeah.
But he took off, and I mean, he had, I don't know how big his lead was on the first couple of laps because he was a sprinter, and he kind of died in the last half hour of the race, but his lead was so big he still won. But I remember talking to Shane going, that kid is fast, and everything about him was perfect. His size, he came from a racing family. His dad, Vince, they owned a shop. His dad was a 6 days rider, great guy. And Josh started in motocross, so he had motocross speed. He had a great pedigree. Everything about him was perfect. So we got Josh, and I remember his mom and dad came over, and I think Josh was 16 or maybe 17, and had never been away from home. And he comes to America, and I'm going to sign him to a 2-year contract to race in America. And his dad had to go run the shop back home. They couldn't stay. And his dad, it was kind of like, hey, Mike, we're really trusting that we're doing the right thing because this is our son and he's going to be by himself. And I remember I'm going, I'll take care of him. Don't worry. I'll make sure everything goes right. I'll do everything I can. I'll treat him like he's mine. And I did. I took him under my wing, and we just developed Josh, and he just got better and better and better. And, first year, I think he was 7th or something. Then the next year he was 5th, and then he was 3rd. And then he was the it kid. And when he won it, I was so pumped because it was such a neat journey to take him from when he was just such a young pup when he got there to when he won it. So Josh is way up on the list too. So, but I mean, there's Paul Whibley, what a character Wibbs was, that guy, probably the toughest human I've ever known in my life. Literally the toughest man I've ever known. We were in Florida at the start of the opener, and everybody's outside the semi, and they're getting dressed and they're going to get their gear. And Paul wore like pretty big shoulder pads underneath his jersey, kind of European style. And he wears jersey over it and tuck it in. He was kind of a Euro look. And he had thrown his shoulder pads down into the tall grass. The semi was just parked in the tall grass in this field in Florida. And he's getting dressed before the race. And he grabs the shoulder pads off the grass and he puts them on. And he's putting on his jersey. He's kind of getting ready. And he was a pretty quiet, soft-spoken guy. And all of a sudden, he's just ripping his jersey off as fast as he can. And I'm like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Well, there was a pile of red fire ants that he'd thrown his shoulder pads into. And he was covered with these red fire ants, and they were biting him everywhere. And he's like, we don't know what to do. We're like slapping him. We're pouring water on him. We don't know what to do. We finally get him up. This is literally moments before they got to go up and start the race. And finally, we kind of get him all down. He gets his pads on. Big welts are showing up where they bit him. And I'm going, Jesus. I go, Paul, you going to be okay? And he just looked at me and goes, I'll be all right, mate. Don't worry about it. I'm like, okay, all right. And I'm pretty sure he got a podium that day. That's how tough that guy was. So, yeah. So off-road, again, there's so many characters, but all different. And then moto, I didn't work with near as many guys. So with Dunge, it was hard with Dungy because of what happened, that whole dynamic that was going on with DeCoster leaving, and Ryan had just won everything, and then Suzuki screwed him, just absolutely screwed him, and they wouldn't hire Roger back, and Ryan was stuck in his contract. So when I came on board, it was real difficult for us to make anything happen from that. But nothing against Ryan. It was just what circumstances were.
Timing. Bad timing. Yeah.
Then what's that?
Just bad timing for you
exactly.
and Doug to develop a relationship. So yeah.
Because I mean, despite everything that happened, we were still a player all year. I mean, the guy was going toe to toe with RV that whole summer, despite everything. But Brett Metcalf, he was a blast. Medi was, to me, there's two kinds of Australians, and I mean, there's the real serious kind of Josh Strangs and then there's kind of the fully laid back kind of goof off Glenn Kearney's. So those to me are the poles of the Aussies, and Medi was right in the middle. Medi was super laid back, but super serious at the same time. Real analytical too about his health, his diet, his technique. Real easy to work with, super easy, especially after what had been going on with Dungy. So it was really a pleasure working with Brett. And then, of course, James. And James was, James was an adventure from the beginning, but a great one. I mean, a truly great one. So yeah, lots of characters, and it's impossible to pick a favorite, really. So,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
You'd be one of the few people who's seen Dunge angry, I guess. Like I can't even. Not sure I could imagine it. I'm not sure I could even imagine him really angry. I've seen him disappointed and a bit bummed out and that sort of thing. But I can't imagine that guy angry. But yeah, it's
he well, especially when I did see him, it was how much, like when your adrenaline's up when after a race and you're just it's. I mean, I think I said the same thing in that Weege podcast. As a racer myself, when someone would cut me off, like totally cut me off, just a stupid move, I would literally, I think I had the mentality to kill somebody when that would happen. I would be so angry, because in the moment, because it's like, first of all, it was an incredibly stupid move you just did. Second of all, you're endangering my life. And then I would just go ballistic. So, I understood it when Dunge would snap. It was like, ooh, okay, just give him some space, And I'm a hothead too. My brothers are hotheads. Some of the most titanic fights in my life have been with my brothers. So I understand that end of the emotional spectrum. So I understood it.
My mum used to have a saying, which rang true to her. So she was the most sort of. Just that lovely lady that was just always smiling and just nice and just you just people could never imagine in a million years. But she used to have a saying that was "Still waters run deep," and that was
absolutely
when she'd had enough, and when if I tipped her over the edge as a kid, oh my!
Watch out!
It was like a volcano. This little lady was like a volcano. And I've got a little bit of that in her myself. Like I'm known for smiling all the time and being very friendly and easy to get along with, that sort of thing. But every now and again, I'm tipped over the edge, and it's pretty volcanic too. So Mike, you stayed really loyal to Suzuki until pretty recent times. Like you were still out there riding with your brother, which is amazing. I love that you still ride with your brothers, and you were still riding an RMZ 450 out in the hills till pretty recently. So yeah, and now
I think it was till 2017, and then that's when Suzuki when they didn't hire DeCoster back in whatever that was, 2010, 2011, that was the beginning of them kind of changing into the company they are now.
yeah,
And every company's different. They all look at things differently. I look at it this way: racing, your success as a racer or as a race team is absolutely equal to the amount of support you get. So as a race team and a race program, if you got the people above you that say, we believe in you, we're going to give you the budget you need, we want you to win, especially at the highest level, which is where the American motocross was, pretty much you can't get above that.
yeah.
I'm going against Honda, whose budget at the time, it was probably at least 10 or 15 times what mine was. KTM, same thing. They had Red Bull money. Kawasaki had monster money. Honda just could do it because it's Honda. They're just, this global power. And I would be looking at Suzuki. I'd be in these meetings going, you guys want me to be competitive, but it's not a equal playing field, and it would get really frustrating. And I knew what Suzuki could do because they had done it with Carmichael. They had made the decision with Carmichael. It's like, okay, get the checkbook out. We're going to throw every single thing at it, and we're going to go win. And once a company decides to do that, and they're that big of a company, it's pretty hard to shut them down. They're going to go win. And that's exactly what they did. Excuse me, with Ricky, because it was whatever Roger wanted, he got. I want 2 semis, one for the lights, one for Ricky. Okay. I want, Ricky wants to try different offsets, triple clamp offsets. I want 3 of every possible dimension. Okay. I mean, beautiful. Billet, that parts department, you'd walk through there, and if you were a moto head, you would almost pass out at the beautiful stuff that was billet calipers and triple clamps and link systems, just tons, and magnesium cases. It was unbelievable. Carbon fiber for aisle after aisle of carbon fiber. It was like an F1 warehouse. So Suzuki knew how to do it. They knew how to do it with Robert and DeCoster in the beginning. They knew how to do it with Ricky. They could do it. And when they decided after they didn't keep Roger, they were making a change. They were making a business decision. And to this day, I'm not sure what it was. I know their bread and butter were small 3-cylinder automobiles for third world nations. So India, Pakistan, Vietnam, Brazil, Venezuela. If you go to those places, you see Suzukis everywhere. There's millions of them, Suzuki cars, these little tiny cars. And that's where they were making their money. Motocross spends a lot of money, doesn't make a lot of money. So that was their decision, and it got really frustrating. But I stuck it out to the very end till finally it was obvious that they were going to quit racing at a factory level, which they did back then. They're racing now with HEP, but it's not a factory program at all. But kudos to HEP and Kenny for what they're doing, because they're basically on really trick production bikes. So, which also tells you how good that RMZ was and is. That bike Kenny's on is not that much different from the 2017 I had. It's basically the same bike. So I mean, Suzuki, they were a brilliant engineering company. They were a terrible marketing company. And unfortunately, you need both. I look at KTM engineering wise, they're absolutely cutting edge, and their motto is racing. It's like that's nice. You know, when you work for a company and that's what they believe in is racing, that's how it should be. That's how it works. So that was the unfortunate thing with Suzuki. They just decided to go a different route, and I ran it as long as I could. I rode the yellow bikes as long as I could, and then like I said, Rodney works for Beta, and Beta's really, they're coming on really strong now, and they got great products. So I got a 2-stroke 300 Beta. I went and tested for the magazine, and then I fell in love with the thing. So that's my go-to bike now. So
Yeah, you're loving that electric start.
I love it. And I love being back on a 2-stroke. I
Yeah.
absolutely love it. So
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, I remember, probably, I can remember it was probably an Instagram post or something when you got the Beta, and it was like, wow, he's not on a Suzuki, it's like,
yeah, everybody's like, whoa.
yeah, it was a bit like that. And yeah, I love it. Like I said, I love that, you post things, you're still riding with Tom and Tip and that sort of thing. Like that's pretty amazing, all those days from that field across the street,
Absolutely.
and
And it's funny because we have another real good friend of ours, Carl Roboto. He grew up on the neighborhood with us, and we all are in this group text, and we go back, and it's on Instagram. I'm looking at, I'm looking at photos and posts of bikes from the 70s, and that's what we share with each other, and it's still that love of that kid in that field. You're exactly right. It's still there.
Yeah. You obviously still have just a huge amount of love for riding, which
Yeah.
I always love that. I can never get my head around when people, and you can see it in their eyes that they still would love to ride, but that they don't do it anymore. I think sometimes
Right.
it's other influences in their life. Their wife's a hard ass, or you don't know, but yeah. You see some people and they'd love to be riding, but they
Right.
don't do it.
Right.
And like to me, it's like oxygen. People who aren't dirt bike people still say to me like, "You're too old for that. Why are you doing that? You're going to hurt yourself." All that sort of thing. So you can't even talk to people like that about it. You just got to change the conversation because
No, it's because we accept the fact that we could
yeah,
get hurt. We
yeah,
know that.
yeah.
When we sign up for it, we knew that going in. So
That's
that
right.
doesn't change us.
Yeah,
And I've changed. I've snowboarded in Alaska. I've surfed. I've done every sport there is. Nothing compares with riding a dirt bike. For me. So, I mean, they're going to have to pull me off one. I'm going to keep riding until I can't sit on one anymore. Because I still, when I get on that bike, I'm still that little kid in the field in my head. I'm still that kid. So.
I'm the same. Yeah, my first riding spot was this place that we called the Swamp because, well, it is a swamp. So, and I'm still that kid. I'm still that kid pushing my bike down the road. I used to push my bike down. It was probably about a mile, I suppose, from my house to the swamp. And it was flat ground, but about half a mile down, there was a rise where there was the railway line. So I was supposed to push my bike all the way out there. And now Dad, we laugh about it now. Dad knew what I was doing. But I would wait. We'd get out, me and my mate. So my mate he'd keep his bike at my place because we all live close to the swamp. And we'd push our bikes down until we were over the railway line. And then we'd start them up and riding down the swamp. And that was like every day after school, I'm still that kid, So
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. Every now and again, Mum and Dad would say, "Did I hear your bike start up?" I was like, No. But they knew what I was doing.
That was my buddy's bike.
Yeah, fantastic. Just a few other random sort of questions, Mike. What's the best thing and what's the worst thing to happen in the sport over your time?
Overall, in general?
Yeah, just in general. Yeah, like whether it's a bike development, track changes, riding styles, anything. What's the best and the worst?
That's a great question. technology wise, I would have to say water cooling was a big change as far as that. Um, I guess even go before that, just reliability. And I came from an era. I remember, like I said, I had a CZ, my first real motocross bike, and I was telling my boys, I'm going, hey, when my bike would start, I'd be stoked. When they would kick it and it would actually light up and start, I would be so pumped that I didn't have to change spark plugs or trying to figure out what was wrong with it. Nowadays it's push button and they're perfect. So the reliabilities, that part changed everything. Today's production bikes are so unbelievably good.
Yeah.
They're so good. Kenny proves it. There again.
Yeah.
Kenny proves that it can literally win at the very highest level of production bike. So that's a big thing. I also I love the growth of the sport. I know that when we were kids, the only race that ever came on was the Carlsbad GP. Would come on TV, and it would come out 6 months later after the race. So the race would be in June, and around Christmas time, the Carlsbad GP would come on. It was ABC's, was the big network, Wide World of Sports, and that was, they would do the GP every year. We watched it religiously. We knew it when it was going to come on. We knew weeks ahead of time. Everybody would be talking about it. So our dream was, God, wouldn't it be amazing if racing was on like every week? It's like, it'll never happen. But so that part is fantastic. I basically, my weekends are, I go riding. I know that the Supercross is going to start at 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock, whatever it is. I know I got it. It's going to be streamed so I can come home, but my day is planned. I'm going to go ride. I'm going to have lunch with my buddies or my kids, whatever I'm going to do. And then I'm going to go watch Supercross. I literally can plan my day around it. So that's really neat that it's made it that far. I know that we wanted our sport to be as big as stick and ball. That was a big thing. It's like, because like you just said, your passion and my passion for the sport is, when we're talking to non-moto people, they have no idea. They think we're nuts. They have no idea what we feel and how proud we are of the sport. And so we always wanted to reach that next level. And through years in the industry, I've come to the fact that we never will reach that next level. We're a niche sport, and we're a spectacular one. We're it's marketing companies love to use images of, big whips and all that, but we're never going to reach that giant broad audience. And that's okay. That's okay. Let's just stay this really great niche sport. It's okay with me. So yeah, worst things that happen, in California out here, it was the land closures was the worst things. We used to be able to ride anywhere we wanted. Basically the desert back then was, you rode to the desert where you started seeing cactus and, dry dirt, and you pulled your bike over on the side of the road or your truck, you unload and you went riding. Well, now it's all, it's government regulated, and you can only go to specific parts or parks that you're allowed to ride in, and a ranger checks your registration and all that's happened. So that probably to me was the worst thing is the land closures. And of course, when you take all this giant group of people that used to ride in this huge area and you funnel them all down to a small focused area, well, then you hear a lot more about the injuries and whatever problems they have, because it's all concentrated. So you're hearing all these problems now. So that, we're killing turtles and whatever endangered species there was. And well, yeah, because you got us all riding in a 200-acre spot. So that would be the negatives, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Yeah, we've faced the same things here, So I remember.
I know.
I certainly remember reading about Super Hunky's. He was the champ. He championed the cause basically.
Absolutely.
Of those land closures. Yeah. So very much court cases and all that sort of thing. I used to remember reading all about him versus the Sierra Club and all that sort of
exactly
all that sort of thing. And but it's I guess that it kind of started there, and it's a worldwide problem now, isn't it? So whether it's housing doing it, and housing and then noise, or whether it's land closures and that sort of thing. And it's something I'm pretty passionate about in Australia. That's for sure. It's a big problem.
Yeah, me too. And it's funny too, as kids, the first thing we would do when we would get our funky little street bike that we're trying to make into a dirt bike is we would cut the muffler. We would literally cut it and make it as loud as we could because that was bitching. We wanted to hear it, right?
Yeah.
And ironically, that's what closed down half the land was the noise.
Yeah.
So as much as we thought it was great,
you didn't know. You just didn't know.
We didn't know. Yeah, we didn't know that the neighbor across the street's trying to put her 2-year-old down, and all they're hearing is my bike wide open with no muffler. So it's I agree. I'm still very passionate. We're still California's an incredibly regulated state, more so than anywhere in the United States, and it's they're still doing things that just make me shake my head. But like where we ride, I mean, it's our secret zone. We've been riding there for decades. There's maybe a helicopter can come see where we are, but nobody's going to follow us back into where we go. So we feel pretty safe about it. So.
That's it. Great stuff. Yeah. We face all the same things, and there's probably spots where people ride where they're not supposed to and that sort of thing. But nobody's going to see you, and if they do, they're probably not going to catch you anyway because you know it so well.
Right.
But you'd have the same thing where it's a small amount of people do really the wrong thing that make it so much harder. Like we'll have
absolutely
what happens in our state forests and the like is especially on long week or this weekend. Like this weekend coming is Queen's birthday or King's birthday now. It's a long weekend, and a lot of people will head out the bush camping and all that sort of thing. And you'll get these folks who they're not really moto people, but they've got bikes, and they'll camp somewhere close to a big like a dirt road, but a big road through the forest. And they'll spend the weekend doing wheelies up and down the road, and with no helmets, and kids with no helmets, and just doing everything wrong and just looking like a pest. And then old couples who are out there in their four-wheel drive exploring think that these dirt bikers are causing trouble, and it's just you just shake your head. It's like
And I would, if I saw that and I didn't understand, I would too. I would say, what a bunch of idiots. I would too. I get it. Out here they're having an issue here because these electric bikes have really taken off, these Surons, these little electric motorbikes, and all the kids out here, they're not regulated now, which is about to change. But all the kids out here get them, and they can ride them anywhere they want. These things do 45 miles an hour. They got full suspension, and they're like mini little, really cool little motorbikes. And you see these kids. I'll be driving like a major street in our town, and I'll see some kids straight up and down in a wheelie, a 40-mile-an-hour wheelie, straight up and down, go by me, no helmet on, nothing. And I'm like, that just, it ruins it for everybody. It's like, that kid thinks he's cool, and he probably posted it on Instagram or Facebook, whatever it is, but that absolutely ruins it for everybody. So like I say, a few idiots can really wreck it for the masses. That's for sure.
Yeah, and meanwhile, at a good, like the club, off-road club that I've been involved with, we go to so much trouble to teach kids the right way, and all that sort of thing. And, kids have got to wear their helmet even in the pits. Like don't even start your bike, put your helmet on, even to go to swim. All this sort of thing to make sure kids are doing all the right stuff and treating each other well, and doing all the right thing, and learning to ride safe and ride properly, and technique and all these things we do. And then we had on the news there just last week, I think, a bunch of kids in Melbourne doing wheelies down the street, and it was this thing like dirt bikers, crazy dirt bikers, is the narrative on the news. Crazy dirt bikers. That's and they're probably stolen bikes anyway, so Mike, you've done a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool, things. What's still on the list to tick off?
Boy, um, well, my boys they're 14 and 16, so
Mm,
now it's my like Rodney says. Rodney's so funny. He stays at my house when he does. He handles all the media for Beta, and all the
mm,
magazines are around here. So,
yeah.
and he lives in Idaho, so he comes here and he'll stay here for 2 weeks, 10 days, whatever it is, do his magazine stuff and use my house as a base. But my kids love him, and of course Rodney's famous and all that. I got his pictures all over the place. So, but Rodney's we'll go riding and we'll take my boys, and my boys, like my older boy, loves football. He loves it, and he's super into it. And he's a really good athlete, and he loves moto too. But he loves football. He loves them both. My youngest, he's a moto head. He's a full moto head. But I don't I don't really want him racing, to tell you the truth.
Mm,
I just know how many times I was hurt, and I got hurt a lot,
mm,
um, a lot. And I don't know, as a dad, I don't want to go through that.
mm,
But at the same time, he really loves it, and obviously, because of his age, he's not going to make it as a national guy. You got to start, you got to
mm.
start 4 or 5 years old now.
Yeah.
You got to get the kid into a camp, into a trainer.
Yeah.
It's so professional now. It's insane.
Mm,
And we didn't do any of that. We just rode in the desert just for fun. But like Rodney says, he goes, Mike, we all go riding and we'll take the boys, and it's a pretty mellow loop. But they're getting faster and faster and better and better. And Rodney goes, he goes, Mike, he goes, you got to think of it this way. He goes, you guys are going to meet in the middle real quick. He goes, because you're gradually going down, right? Because that's what happens with age. He goes, and your boys are going up. He goes, so you guys are going to meet in the middle pretty soon to be able to ride and do the same stuff. And I'm really looking forward to that. I'm
mm,
looking because I can still do the gnarly stuff I've always done, because I'm real into physical fitness and training, and that allows me to still do what I want to do on a bike.
mm,
Um, and I know that window is not open forever. I know it's slowly closing.
mm,
Just Father Time wins. But I still love doing that, and if I can get to the point where the boys and I can go do like some of the big, really challenging, gnarly stuff, that's probably where I'll hang the hat up and go, okay, now I'm ready for, an adventure bike or
yeah.
or whatever it is, and
Adventure bike
start
course.
kicking
Yeah.
back. Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll probably be the last thing that I wanted to accomplish. So
Mm. That's a great one. Yeah, that's most people are saying, "Oh, I want to go here and ride in some other country or whatever." I love that.
well,
I love that one. Yeah,
I was
I love that.
lucky because I got to ride all over the world. I mean,
Mm,
I've ridden all over the United States and all over the world. I've got to do all those things, which I was supremely blessed with the career I had and the life I had. So now the things I look at are a little bit different. I got to do all those big bucket list things. Now I what I want to do are a little bit different now. So
mm. Yeah, it's good, and I certainly understand. Like my daughter, she just trail rides very very cautiously and carefully, and but just following her around is like it's just the greatest thing, like
it's the
it's
greatest.
amazing. Yeah, like she's 16. Well, I got her a 50, of course, and I pushed her too hard on the 50, and a couple of crashes, and she was like, "That's it, I'm out. I ain't
I'm
doing this."
done.
I said, I stopped it up. I pushed too hard.
Yeah.
And then when she was about 13, she came to me and wanted to do it again. So, yeah, which is awesome. And, like she just, we'll go out the bush where there's sort of my usual spot. I've got just like a practice loop. It's pretty boring, but I just pound laps and keep myself fit, because there's no good riding here. You got to travel a few hours away, to get to any good spots. But next to my loop there's a kids loop, and she'll do laps of that, and I'll go out and I'll do a few laps, and then I'll jump on the kids loop and follow her around, make sure she's okay, and that sort of thing. And it's yeah, it's amazing just sharing that time with your kids, and just seeing her joy on that bike, seeing her getting
Absolutely.
that joy from a motorcycle is really
And
cool.
you understand, like when my boys we get done with a ride and they're go, Dad, did you see me on that uphill or the down? I'm like, Yeah, boys, I'm right there with you, man. I first of all, I was you exactly, and now I can look back and see that, and I can enjoy it so much. Yeah, I can't imagine doing that in baseball or basketball, sharing that kind of thing. I can't imagine that. Only dirt bikes allow me that. So
yes,
they've been good to me. They've been really good to me.
I'm the same. Just some fun questions, just some fun stuff, Mike. What sort of music are you into?
Boy, basically rock and roll. I'm a drummer. I've been playing
Okay.
drums since I
Yeah.
was probably about 11. So God, I love all forms of rock. Lately, I've been getting into a lot of country rock, which, it's kind of neat because you get the storytelling of country, but the influence of the rock musicians. So I love that. Yeah, I pretty pretty broad music interests. Anything from, geez, Beatles to the Foo Fighters. Throw Jimmy Buffett in there. I mean, I love it all. So, but definitely a rocker. So
Yeah. If you could go back, is a question I've been throwing around a bit lately, on the show and to friends and stuff. If you could go back in time to a concert, to see a concert, or just to see a band in a small bar, anything, where are you going? Who are you seeing?
because I'm a child of the '60s, without doubt, the Beatles had just their influence was equal to On Any Sunday with dirt bikes.
Yeah,
Um, when Tom and I, we were pups. We were 6 or 7 years old or something, and A Hard Day's Night, the Beatles' first movie, came out. And again, we stayed in the theater. I think I got in so much trouble from my dad because we never came home. We rode our bikes there and stayed and watched it, I don't know, 4 times in a row. But it had such an impact. The music and just the guys were just, it was just a game changer, absolute game changer. So there's nothing close as far as the Beatles. And I've loved a million bands and I've been to a million concerts, but they had such an impact on me. And again, it goes back. I think the biggest impacts are when the youngest you are that you remember. So, and that's my youngest memories of music were them. So that still to this day, if I hear a Beatles song, I can kind of picture where I was when I first heard it, and I know every word and every chord, and so yeah, it would probably trying to see them somewhere would be a dream.
nice one. Nice one. I like the answer. My dad's a big Beatles fan, so yeah, he was huge into him. Still is big Beatles fan, particularly John Lennon. So yeah, we certainly
Right.
we heard a lot of Beatles.
I bet.
Those Beatles tapes were in the station wagon, in the old Ford station wagon, probably on repeat a
Right.
lot of times. So I've heard
That's great. That's great.
I've heard all of that, and yeah, like a lot of us, I still love a lot of my dad's music, so and my kids like my music, so which is
Well,
cool.
again, I think you appreciate what you heard when you were young. That resonates with you. It sticks with you. I remember too the same thing. Listening to my dad he was into early country way back then, which I couldn't stand. To me, it was just twang music, and I didn't understand the lyrics, and I didn't like. There was no good driving beat to it.
Mm.
But I remember growing. Now that I'll hear old Willie Nelson or whatever my dad was listening to. I'm like, damn, I remember hearing that when I was a kid. Yeah, and it's still. I remember that fondly. So
Yeah.
that's cool.
It takes you back, doesn't it? It takes
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
takes me back to sitting on the bench seat in the Ford station wagon, and
Yep.
dad driving and that sort of thing, and dad probably singing along to the songs, and my sister
Probably
probably singing
belting it
along,
out.
and
Yeah.
all that sort of thing. So it takes you back, and and even takes you back to like so my dad raced cars, and a lot of my childhood good memories were going to races, going to races with dad,
Right.
and there'd always be music playing and that sort of thing. So those
That's great.
those early morning trips on the old vinyl bench seat would be freezing cold, and you
Yeah.
you remember those
Yep.
those little things, yeah. And the V8 station wagon, yeah, be rumbling, yeah. Awesome. Mike, this has been fantastic. I've kept you a while. There's just a couple of things I do to close out the show. First one is give me your best Aussie accent. I reckon you give me your best. Here we go. Give me your best Josh Strang or Glenn Carney impersonation then.
Crikey, Mike. This dog's a piece of shit. That would be Josh Strang.
Hey, that was pretty good, Mike. That was pretty good. Yeah, you spent a bit of time around Aussies. That wasn't bad. That was up there. Yeah, I got to say.
Pretty good.
Yeah,
I've had a few Aussies.
yeah, that was a pretty good one. Yeah, awesome. And the last thing I do, well, actually, I've just noticed I nearly forgot. Before the last thing I do, I better do. I've been that enthralled in the conversation. I haven't done the Guts Racing ad read yet, so I've got the Guts on.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, Guts Racing is a sponsor of the show. I'm very proud to say. We've got Guts Racing winning all over the world. So RJ Hampshire, he lit the flames for his Supercross Championship on a Guts seat. Just on the weekend there, Lucas Conan, he is winning MXGPs on a Guts seat. Jed Beaton won the Manjim Up 15,000 on the weekend in Australia on a Guts seat. So they all have something in common, winning on those Guts seats. Also does Phil Nicoletti for Club MX. Mitchell Harrison's up there racing in Canada at the moment, and Aaron Tandy for PRMX Kawasaki on a Guts seat. Also using Guts seats is Moto Concepts, AEO KTM, Next Level KTM, Phoenix Honda, Dylan Ferrandis is out there on a Guts seat, Hep Suzuki, Kenny, Chiz, Shane, all out there, and of course Rockstar Husqvarna using Guts seats. You can get seat covers, complete seats. You can get custom seats. The seat bump is coming back. That's a thing again. People are starting to use the old seat bump again. You can get the ultralight seat foam. You can get replacement seat foams. You can get the wide wing seat if you want a bit more grip around the knees. A huge range of colors. The pretty much colors, if you can think of it, they have it available. The website's amazing. You can go on there. You can pick the color for the side, for the top, for the stripes. You can get tall seats. If you're tall, like I know brother Tom Wolfman, he's always been a tall seat guy. You can get. They even do Velcro fitment now. If you don't want to be using the old staple gun. And as Privateer Hero Scott Meshy says, he's also a Guts athlete, and he says they're a butt gripper and they will make you a ripper.
There you go.
They go and get around Guts seats, and we have a little competition going on for a Guts seat giveaway at the moment, which is specifically for veterans. Me and some veteran friends who are also moto guys, we did a episode on Memorial Day. And from that episode, all the details are in there, but I'll just add them to this. If you are a veteran or who rides, or you're a veteran whose kids ride, email me at AussieSteve569@gmail.com, or hit me up on Instagrams. If you're watching this show, I'm sure you also follow me on Instagram. Hit me up and just tell me a little story about just a brief on your time in the military. No detail, just just maybe a little bit about that, and then about your moto, what you ride, where you ride, or your kids ride. Just tell us a bit of a story about being a veteran who is loving his time now in moto. And my friends Cody and Felipe, who are on the show, are going to basically read those and pick a winner for a Guts seat cover. That's as simple as that. They will, whichever story touches their heart, I guess I'll be leaving it up to those guys to choose, and we'll get a will get a free gut seat cover out to that veteran for his bike or for his kid's bike. So absolutely get around that contest. Gutsracing.com is the website. If you do need a seat cover or any of those other products, gutsracing.com. That's a very easy one to remember. Cool.
Very cool.
That's it. All right, Mike. The last thing I do to close out the show is I sing a little bit of Kenny Rogers. There's a bit of a funny backstory to it that I won't bother you with, but I always say if anybody wants to join in and you know the words to The Gambler, then by all means, it's only a small part of that song. And so I will ease into that, and you're welcome to join in, but you don't have to. So I handed him my bottle, and he drank down my last swallow. Then he bummed a cigarette and asked me for a light, and the night got deathly quiet, and his face lost all expression. Said, if you're going to play the game, boy, you got to learn to play it right. You got to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, know when to run. You never count your money. When you're sitting at the table, there'll be time enough for counting when the dealing's done. Mike Webb, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thanks for having me, Steve.
No worries. You enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, mate.
Thanks, man. Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.